order about 6:03 p.m. And before we get to agenda review, I wanted to take a minute or two and offer some comments. This past week, Sheila and I started reviewing the bylaws of the council, and it reminded me of our purpose for being here. I've been on the council for a long time, but it's really good to kind of look at the purpose or the objectives of the council once in a while. And I'd like to just go through those with us really quick, if I might. So the Police Advisory Council is tasked with the following: to foster understanding and communication between the citizens of Gainesville and the Gainesville Police Department, and to review and advise the chief regarding relations between Gainesville Police and all community segments. To increase the involvement by the citizens in police and community programs. You won't find this anywhere, I've got this separate. To review and advise the chief on personnel policy and procedures as requested by the chief and/or city commission. Work to strengthen and ensure throughout the community the application of equal protection under the law. To acquaint citizens with the operation of the Gainesville Police Department and its varied activities. To serve as a panel to discuss closed internal investigations for discussion purposes with regards to what processes may be considered in preventing the occurrences of future activities. To assist in preventing the occurrences of future activities. To assist in crime prevention through the distribution of material on crime deterrence. To generate community interest and involvement in crime prevention. To include community-oriented policing and other areas of community relations. And finally, to review and make recommendations concerning matters that may be referred to the PAC from time to time to the City Commission or Chief of Police. And I think as we kind of go through the agenda and we go through some attachments that I'm going to provide, we're attending to these very nicely. And I think it's just good to hear that once in a while. I would also like to just take a moment and talk a little bit about meeting decorum. As we are a Gainesville Police Department Advisory Council, we have a set of meeting decorum that we follow. And I'd like to go through that briefly. The Police Advisory Council recognizes the importance of protecting the right of all persons to express opinions and encourages participation. The Council will not prohibit public criticism of the policies, procedures, programs, or services of GPD or the Council. While the Council recognizes the rights of individuals' free speech, this meeting is a limited public forum in which the Council must conduct its business meeting. The Council recognizes the necessity for conducting orderly and efficient meetings in order to complete business in a timely manner and has adopted these rules to balance the rights of individuals to speak on issues while conducting its business meeting. We encourage civility in public discourse and request that speakers direct their comments to the council chairperson. Signs, props, and posters are not permitted in the meeting room, and speakers should introduce themselves and limit their comments to 3 minutes. Persons demonstrating disruptive behavior at this meeting or persons violating established rules of order will be called to order by the council chairperson. If disruptive behavior continues, the person will be provided a final warning, and if disruptive behavior continues, the person will be removed from the meeting. So that's meeting decorum. We follow the same decorum as the City Commission does when we meet.
Why are we going through all this right now, or?
It's important, Sheila, I think that
I don't think so. I think that we're doing a bunch of business stuff now, when what I'm interested in is the update on the K-9 unit, which is number 9.
And we will get to that.
As
the chair, I have the prerogative to offer comment, and I've offered my comment. So I'd like to go now to the agenda review. And if I might, we'll have the minutes review. We have some certificates of appreciation. We have public comment for non-agenda items. Typically, we have citizens that would like to speak on non-related agenda items. Then we have council business. We have several of those items. And I would offer to add a D under council business, sunshine law review. And then we have council discussion. We'll have the chief's update on the K-9 unit, closed IA case review, public, that should be public comment for agenda-related items, and then council member comments after that. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
No, I moved to change 4 to the end, and I moved to move the update on the K-9 unit up, wherever you want to put it. All this business stuff is just, that is not why I'm here, and I did do my duty this week by coming and helping with the bylaw changes, so I'm pretty sure we've already done that this year. So I'm more interested in actually talking about issues instead of having 13 other items.
Well, Sheila, we do have business that we have to attend to, and
Okay, can
We
I
need to
move that
complete those
4
items.
be put at the bottom so that any people that are here don't have to, we already just took all this time for photos.
again, I think it's important that we show appreciation to people, and the more people that see that appreciation, the better.
Okay, I move that 4 be put at the bottom. Can we vote on that? I'm
Sure.
sure I'll
Is
be
there a second?
outvoted as always.
Is there any discussion? All those that would move certificates of appreciation to the bottom of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No.
Where it is.
Let's do it by show of hands. Those who would move item 4 to the bottom of the agenda, please raise your hand.
Hold on 1 second. Give me 1 second.
May I have a question? I have a question, Mr.
Please,
Who is the certificate of appreciation to? To our chief or?
the outgoing chair.
Well,
It is me.
that's only gonna take.
It should take less than 1
yeah,
minute.
That's gonna take seconds.
It'll
That's
take
why
us more time to vote than it will to
Yeah.
present
I
those.
I will motion to move.
Well, the motion is on the floor.
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor to move forward to the end.
Are you willing to withdraw your motion?
I'm just like, you know,
If-
I think we should be talking about real stuff myself.
Okay.
I can give you an alternative.
Okay.
Withdraw your motion.
Just tell me what the alternative is
Or
first.
you have to withdraw your motion.
Okay, I withdraw it.
Okay.
Okay, the floor is now open.
I will motion to move number 9 to number 6.
It's been moved to move update on K-9 unit to after public comment for non-agenda items. Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, discussion? All those in favor of moving update on K-9 unit to after public comment, please raise your hand. Okay, motion carries unanimously. So 9 becomes 6. Okay, other comments regarding the agenda? Motion to approve the agenda?
So move with the changes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, second.
Second.
All those in favor, please say yes.
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 Any against? Motion carries, agenda is passed. Okay, you have a set of minutes.
It was sent to us.
Sorry, ma'am?
It was sent to us, wasn't it?
Yes.
So we've already had a chance to review it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just got to vote to approve them.
Under public comment, I believe the commenter's last name is misspelled.
Okay. I wasn't at this meeting, so I actually didn't
Chanzes, I think. Not Chavez.
Mr.
Oh.
Chair, I move to approve the, what are we voting on? The minutes with the one correction. Evelyn Clark is the
It's been
one.
moved to approve the minutes with the correction to the name. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say yes.
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 Everybody, thank you. Minutes are approved. Chief?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Chief.
I want to take a moment to just recognize the service. I mean, this board takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of dedication, and we think it's not robbery to recognize folks for their diligence and their sacrifices for attending this meeting. We have 2 certificates. One is not here. This first one is for Bertina Melvin. And again, we'll have this, and we'll make sure she gets that. The second one is for the chair, the past chair, and that's for Ms. Gina Massadacasa. And it reads, in the appreciation of dedication, exemplary service, and support to the Gainesville Police Department and the City of Gainesville, with her valuable contribution as the chairperson of the Gainesville Police Department's Police Advisory Council, given this 22nd day of March 2023 by Cynthia Curry, City Manager, and Lonnie Scott, Chief of Police. So thank you, please.
Where's the photographer?
Thank you. Oh, yes, photographer's speech, I'll control myself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll get this to Ms. Melvin.
Thank you.
when we can.
Appreciate it. Gina, thanks for all your hard work as chair this past year.
Happy to do it. I'm delighted to just be on the board.
We look forward to your comments. Yeah, I'd like to open the floor up to public comment for any non-agenda item related, any non-agenda related items. Seeing none, we'll close the floor. We'll move to the update on K-9 unit. Executive Lieutenant Mike West, Captain Anthony Ferrero. Chief Scott.
So I do the introduction of these folks coming up, and basically what we're going to show you is the presentation that we've shown to a couple other groups. We've met with a couple of different community groups, and we gave them a chance to see really what we've been doing with the K-9 unit over the last few months. I think most of you are aware that the K-9 unit is in limited deployment status at this point. We're going to give you an explanation. I think that's one of the things that we thought was valuable, is educating the public about what we do and why we do it. And so this is an explanation about the K-9 unit, of what we do and why we do it. We're going to give you some statistics so that you can look at it, and really the information that we give you is just for you to sit down and look at, think about it. I ask that you have an open mind when you look at it, assess the data that we provide. This is the data that we gathered over the last couple of months to try to make sure that we could have a good understanding and relay that understanding to the public about what we do and how we do it. I have 2 presenters tonight. One is going to be Captain Anthony Ferrara. The other will be Chief Inspector Jamie Koenig. And I think we need to introduce our K-9, new K-9 supervisor. He's in charge of the SWAT team, and one of the other areas that we placed under his control was the K-9 unit, and that's Lieutenant Mike West. Mike, can you stand up? The one that looks like a preacher right there, that's Lieutenant West. And so Lieutenant West really has been tasked with helping to reshape the K-9 unit. We've had a process where we identified 2 people to add to the unit. We're looking for a couple more. We're just trying to right now get our policy in place, get our instruction in place, and once we get all that done, we hope over the next few months we get everything lined up and put the unit back into a regular duty status. But without any further delay, I'll ask Captain Ferrara to come up and begin the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Anthony Ferrara. I think we've met multiple times in the past. So my position is with the Patrol Support Bureau, and that is essentially all the specialty teams that we have at the Gainesville Police Department: K-9, traffic, SWAT, critical incident scene management, negotiation response team. Goes on and on and on from there. The one thing that I wanted to make sure that everyone understands in this meeting in particular, since it's a much different environment than the environment that we were at previously for the previous 2 presentations, is if you have a question, I think, Chief, and if you don't mind, if you have a question as I go along, please interrupt me. I think it's just easier when things are fresh as opposed to waiting until the end and then asking a question at the end, because I just enjoy the timeliness more than trying to keep track of where we're at. So thank you. The history of the K-9 unit here at the Gainesville Police Department, it starts between 1960 and 1964, depending on whether or not you believe the history of GPD book or some articles from the Gainesville Sun. Police K-9 in and of itself actually started in 1899 in Belgium. New York City police officers went to Belgium, identified some K-9 breeders in the country of Belgium, and decided that this is something that they wanted to start to incorporate, be it the tracking implement, be it the apprehension implement, be it a lot of different things. So there was discussion earlier on that this actually started during the Civil War. It did not. Police K-9s didn't start until 1899. There's plenty of history behind that. The current team makeup are apprehension dogs, the ones that you'll see that are normally deployed, do a building search, do a track, and eventually, if necessary, apprehend someone. We only have 2 of them right now. We have one German Shepherd, that is Corporal Dylan Hayes Morrison, who is now the acting supervisor over the K-9 unit. And then the other is the young lady that was on the cover, and that is Corporal Casey Walsh, and she has Belgian Malinois. The uses today, we'll get to in a comprehensive overview. That includes tracking, community events, apprehensions, building searches, et cetera, et cetera. The addition to our apprehension team, or the regular patrol team, is we have 2 K-9s that are assigned specifically to the highway interdiction team, or the HIDA unit from our drug task force. Those are single-purpose dogs. They do not, if they get into a fight on the side of I-75, those dogs do not assist in an apprehension. They're single-purpose dogs. They just detect narcotics. They're not part of an apprehension. We don't call them out to do a building search, or like a Home Depot got broken into, or a Publix or something like that. We do not call those dogs out. The dogs is a de-escalation device. The way that it was explained in the community meetings is, essentially, if you have one person in this room that was committing a crime, and you have 7 officers come in the door, chances are those 7 officers have enough presence to make that person change their mind. And that's the same thing with the K-9. Normally when a K-9 is on scene, and our bite ratio explains that vividly, 90% of the time, or more, that person actually decides that, okay, my channel has been changed, and I do not want to affect the next thing, which is potentially a bite. Now, in some years in the past, our bite ratio was down to almost 3%. So that meant that year, 97% of the time, when someone was actually put in handcuffs, 97% of the time that they were put in handcuffs, and a dog was on scene, they did nothing. Only 3% of the time did the dog actually make that apprehension. And that's going back to our 2012 statistics from 2012 to 2022. So that was one of the low years. So as a de-escalation tool, it's basically proven itself. Next slide. So what does it actually take to get on the K-9 unit? On March 10th, we had a tryout. We had 4 people try out. Only 2 of them made it. Not only is there an oral board part of it, we have a scenario part, we have a land navigation part, we have a firearms part, we have a part in there of physical fitness. Everything is tangible and relatable to what these officers would be doing with their K-9. So once they finish up the selection process and a dog is assigned to them, they go through the FDLE minimum mandatory 480 hours of instruction. But at GPD, our onset training is closer to 600 hours. So we eclipse that 480 by over 120 hours, an additional 3 weeks. So after those 600 hours, the dogs have to be certified by an evaluator. And even then, that evaluator can say, no, absolutely not. The dog isn't doing what it needs to do. The handler is using the dog inappropriately, I'm not going to certify the dog. So that means it is out of service. It can be sent back to training, or that dog and handler can be just nixed from the program. Every year, we recertify. And it just happens to be that every year that we recertify, it just happens to be on the beginning of the fiscal year, which is October of every year we recertify. So what do we do in the meantime? Between those certifications, what do we do? Per Kerr versus West Palm Beach, and we spoke about it at the MLK Center, that Florida Supreme Court decision says that we have to train at minimum 16 hours a month, 8 hours a day for 2 weeks during the month. Well, we do 10 hours a week, so 40 hours a month we're training. And sometimes it's just a little bit less than that, than those 10 hours per week, because we get called out during training, so go ahead.
Okay. You said 10, when you refer to we, are you talking about the team, Miss Captain West and the other person? When you say we?
So it's the dog, the handler, and a trainer.
Okay.
So now I can walk, I am not a trainer, I can observe. At this point in time, Lieutenant West is not a trainer, he can observe, but it's the dog and handler teams themselves. So it's not just the dog being trained, it's the handler as well. And the handler has to show proficiency just as much as the animal has to show proficiency.
And who evaluate them?
So the trainer evaluates them on a monthly basis. During the maintenance training, every week, the trainer does the evaluations. But then an outside independent evaluator does the annual certifications. Now sometimes, because our former trainer was certified in 2 different disciplines, so he was an evaluator and a trainer, but what would happen is we would bring in teams from all over, St. Johns County, Alachua County, and we do an evaluation all on the same day.
Oh, so it's more than one evaluator that comes in and relay, or they come from the...
So now we have to go to an outside entity now for a outside entity evaluator, because Sergeant Charles Owens is no longer an evaluator for us. So we have to go to the outside. So where that person will be from the outside is basically anyone's guess right now. We have between now and October to get that evaluator set up. So,
and how's that selection process done in terms of picking who will be the outside evaluator?
how is that selection process done?
Yes. Is there a
It's
process?
usually by contract, and whether or not they have a evaluation date available during our time frame. So a lot of the times it's in kind, which means it's free, but other times we would actually have to pay. So what we look for is in kind evaluations. In this way, we'll just tag along with other agencies, and we might have to pay a per diem or something to that effect, something minuscule. But that person is not on our payroll. That would be a contract, and it would be a contract for that specific day.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Martin.
Do you want to keep taking questions as we go, or hold to the end? What's going to work?
I thought it was easier and timely to take questions as we go, as opposed to...
To the extent that you know about operation of the unit before the current time, what can you tell us about this dog named Ranger? Because we got information that indicated that officers in the unit had concerns of getting bitten by Ranger, and that this dog was apparently resistant to commands, or something was going on, that the officers themselves had some nervousness about the dog. Can you tell us anything about that?
As of right now, I can tell you without question that each one of the dogs, no matter who it is, whether it be Ranger or Stern or any of the dogs when they are in work mode can be dangerous in a way. However, this seemingly like almost like an urban myth that the other handlers were afraid of the dog is honestly preposterous. And they catch each other's dogs during training. They run with each other's dogs during training. The aptitude that the handlers have with each other's dogs is off the charts. And what I mean by that is each one of the handlers has a very good working knowledge, not only of the other dogs, but the environment that the other dogs stay in. So they've been to each other's homes. If need be, they'll care for the other dogs if the other person's out of town or out of pocket for some reason or another. So there is a huge working network relationship. If any of the handlers, or especially if Sergeant Owens was to have said, this dog is too dangerous, then it was a simple decision by our chief to take that dog offline. We've never gotten that. So I don't know what urban myth created this idea that everyone in the unit was deathly afraid of a single dog, but that's what it is, a myth.
Well, except that it was on the camera where he said it.
You said that 4 people tried out and 2 made it.
Yes.
What were the areas of weakness that disqualified for?
Land navigation. We put them on one set on the east side of some woods, and their destination is a mile away through extremely thick woods. And when I said that each one of those exercises is a tangible and tactical exercise, that's exactly what they would run into in the middle of the night if they were tracking someone through the woods. So the idea was, the officer had a radio in case something went wrong, but they weren't allowed to use their cell phones or GPS or anything else as a help. We wanted them to actually navigate if all of these other implements didn't work. So we had 2 officers make it from one side of the woods to the other in the determined time period, which was 90 minutes. Unfortunately, 2 of them did not make it. One almost circled right back to the beginning, and the other one was at minimum a mile away from where they should have ended up at the end of those 90 minutes. So it's all tangible and it's all trackable, and the same scenario has been used in multiple canine tryouts in the past.
And then, from my understanding, there's other units that very new officers with very little experience have been applied to, such as SWAT, SROs. How new of officers are you going to allow in K9?
So right now, it's 1 year at GPD, and it's minimum a year of experience in either another agency or corrections or military. That's the basement. That's the 0 level. The officers that applied were between that 2-year level, and Officer Dan Renningdring has 12 years, at least 12 years experience. So from 2 to 12 years, a 10-year time span.
Did you use peppy dogs at all to help with the training or certification?
Did-
You know, peppy dogs?
No, sir. Not this go around. Nope. Okay, I'm going to move on in the presentation. All right, so what have the canine unit handlers and dogs been capable of doing in the past? From saving a choking child, our new canine supervisor, Dylan Hayes Morrison, and at that time, Amanda Cummings, were looking for a wanted subject. With their dogs, a woman ran up to them with a choking baby. They saved the choking baby by giving the baby CPR. The next one up on the top in the center, that is then officer, but he winds up being a sergeant, Mike Pruitt, and his canine, Giroux. Giroux was actually shot multiple times and saved Sergeant Pruitt's life. Moving further over is Ray Chevalier and his dog Hans. Hans and Chevalier cornered an individual in a burglary incident, and that person who got cornered shot Hans and was able to save Ray Chevalier's life. And then on the bottom, that is Patrick Hopkins. Pat Hopkins is the only recipient in GPD history of the Carnegie Heroism Award. And Pat Hopkins was literally thrown through a window by another officer into a burning house. Got a mentally impaired person up and out of the house right before it collapsed. So he won the Carnegie Heroism Award. So what other uses beyond patrol do we have? We have community engagement. After COVID, this came to pretty much a standstill. We were oftentimes at schools, at civic functions, at just about anything that someone asked us to go to. We would do a demonstration, showed how high the dogs can jump, how they handle themselves around children, things of that nature. We did not have much of an opportunity since COVID to regain any kind of traction with community events, and specifically the numbers in the K-9 team started to dwindle. At our maximum, we were at 9, and then we've gone down considerably, and now we're just at 2. The other thing is missing persons. There was a question in the MLK Center presentation about when was the last time, or
Yeah,
how
I
many
have
times?
that question again.
Okay, well, I answered it yesterday, so I'll answer it again today.
I was at the
last-
MLK, I was at another meeting
Okay.
last night.
So the last time before the K-9 unit really condensed was December 22nd of 2022. A young man, we presumed, was abducted or walked away from his home. There were very suspicious circumstances. Each one of the 4 working K-9 handler groups searched the woods to the north, south, east, and west of his home. It was all for naught because he wound up being found in Clay County a couple of days later. But that was the last time that we were used to assist in finding a missing person.
So do you know
December.
how many in the last few years that the size brought up that you've used for missing,
So I-
to look for missing people?
I would say roughly a dozen times, roughly a dozen. And
Would it be okay to get those numbers? for
yes,
the
it would
last
be okay
couple
to get
years?
those numbers.
Thank
Yep,
you.
I can do that.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so what actually happens on a K-9 call? If, for example, there's a crime involved. First and foremost, if we were to come to this building, there was broken windows, ceiling tiles down, et cetera, and we don't know whether or not somebody's in there, we will give an announcement at the door. You know, Gainesville Police K-9, make yourself known, otherwise I'll release the dog. We say that multiple times, hoping to get some kind of response. If that doesn't work, then we go in and we start searching the building. Those announcements are not required to be made all the time as we are on a track. Okay, there's a Supreme Court case called Jarvella. Jarvella tells us that we do not have to use basically a Doppler effect and let somebody know exactly where we are as we approach them so that they can ambush us. So an announcement is made, people have the opportunity to give up. They can either say, yes, here I am, or they can keep on hiding or attempt to run. During a track, there are 2 different ways that we would do a track. Misdemeanor track, the animal is on a 6-foot leash, and that misdemeanor track is the assumption that there's not a firearm involved, that it was a domestic battery type incident, a violation of a domestic violence injunction. It's things of that nature where there's not a known weapon involved. However, if there's a known weapon involved, like an aggravated battery, an aggravated assault, someone with a firearm, etc., we would use a longer leash, a 20-foot leash. And for those of you that have been in the police science and looked at things, especially you, Mr. Griner, you know that this 21-foot rule seems to be entrenched in police science. And that 21-foot rule tells us that from the time it is that I have a stimulus, for the time for me to get my weapon up and on target, is pretty much the same time frame that someone can be running towards me, an average person running towards me from roughly 21 feet away. So that 21-foot leash gives us an opportunity to not be ambushed by someone. The dog is first. So when it comes to the actual apprehension, what's going on? The dog would be used to pursue someone because the dogs are much, much faster than any human. And at that point in time, people can either surrender and the dog is called off, or there's an actual capture, which for most people equates with the dog bites them. Now, as soon as that bite occurs, first aid is immediately given to them, or summoned. We can't always help 100% of the people because there are some things that are medically beyond our expertise. So, and you'll see it or hear it over and over again. There are some instances that look horrendous, but once everybody's cleaned up, they're just very average. I don't want you to do it, but you knock yourself in the head and cut yourself on the forehead because you have all of these blood vessels and everything else going on in the skin. directly adjacent to your skull, you're going to bleed and look like a zombie apocalypse. But once cleaned up, you're fine. And I'm not saying fine, everybody's fine. What I'm saying is it's not nearly as bad as it appears. So, starting in our November meeting with the City Commission, there was an ask for some canine policy updates. V2 Global is a company that was hired by the Gainesville Police Department to do just that. Overlook our policies and procedures and see what's working, what's not working, what's missing, and what can be added. So one of the things that we added right away was that Chief Lonnie Scott and the command staff are going to be notified of every injury. That was it was not standardized. Sometimes the chief would learn the next day that a canine apprehension was made, or sometimes, depending on the shift commander, he knew immediately after first aid was summoned to that person. So right now, we've standardized it so that if a canine apprehension is made, the chief and the rest of the command staff are paged, and we know immediately that there is an injury. Or if it needs further attention, that the chief needs to respond. The other recommendation in that V2 Global review was to add the electronic collar that we use as a physical implement to have the dog released, as well as a breaker bar. That's also a physical implement that we use to have the dog released. Those were not in our past policy in 2019, but have been updated. Another recommendation was the training of tactical officers to provide oversight for the handler team as they were going out on a track. We do this very sporadically, and what I mean by that is people are not assigned as this canine tactical officer on every shift, just like we have a breath test operator or a radar operator on every shift. What we're planning to do is once the canine unit gets up to full staffing and the canine teams are assigned to a specific shift, is to identify members on that shift that can be put in this tactical officer position. We are very fortunate that sporadic throughout the department, we have former canine handlers that usually take up that role on each shift anyway. But the formal recommendation was to have tactical canine officers trained.
What does tactical mean? I mean,
So what happens is the dog and the handler should never be the same team that put hands on someone, because you can't necessarily control the animal and control somebody that's trying to get out of handcuffs. So the tactical or the oversight officer would be trained with exactly what the expectations are with that canine unit member, that handler, that's normally going to be assigned to the team. And this way, they have a very good working relationship of how far away to be, what kind of distance they're going to have, which way to go in to make an apprehension, and all these things are planned out in advance instead of just picking and choosing people from the shift to assist. So a lot of the tactical officers that are on teams throughout the nation normally are rifle certified, and some of them are just regular officers that just have a handgun, but the training that goes into that is going to be exemplified to the point where those teams are very familiar with the tactical officers, and the tactical officers are very familiar with the teams that they work with on an everyday basis.
So we have an internal investigation where a dog bit on the neck, and I think what seems to me like that officer did everything she was supposed to. It was pretty impressive.
Yes, ma'am?
But at the end, she needed someone to help her. So
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
saying that she wouldn't go in with the dog unless the other tactical, because she couldn't see, she didn't have a flashlight, she couldn't use the breaker bar, which at the end of this, I want to ask why it's not voice control instead, even though that's the way
I'll tell you
everyone-
right now, and this way you don't
Okay.
have to wait. What happens is,
Because it seemed like she wanted to get the dog off of the guy that had him by the neck,
Mhm.
but she couldn't see. She had to get the breaker bar. I don't understand why.
well, what you'll see, not only, I'll tell you, but also you'll see it in the video, is that voice commands have been picked up by people over time, that they will actually tell the dog what to do instead of the handler telling the dog what to do. And those voice commands, and you'll see there's the voice command simply no, for example. That no was the voice command for out, which meant stop biting that person and go away. Well, we've had instances where people that are in tune with canines have actually given the canine commands to canines that were about to apprehend them. So now the new version of the canine release is a physical canine release as opposed to simply a verbal. Now, as the dog runs towards someone and they say they give up, there will be a command to turn around and come back to the handler. If somebody gives up, we're not just going to allow the dog to
So
continue
the
and continue.
electronic collar, can that stop them from
Yes,
biting?
that's why it was added to the policy.
Okay,
The
so
electronic
what is
collar as
that?
well.
So the handler will have something that will shock the dog and he'll notice
It's
release?
the word shock, yes, but it's normally a vibration that the dog gets in tune with. Okay, that means I need to do something different.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Other changes to our policy included the dogs are not going to be used for simply crowd control. And normally, our former chief, Tony Jones, would say something in regards to crowd control back in the 60s and all the horrendous photos of how the canines were used way back then. We're not using them for crowd control. However, we will use them for riot response, okay, in response to resistance that's caused by riots. If people are attacking each other, they are looting, there's arson, et cetera, that's a riot response, and yes, we will use the dogs for that. The list of different crimes that we're using the animals for has been condensed considerably to the point where it's forcible felonies, and even under that forcible felony list, there are additional caveats. For example, for a burglary, a residential burglary or a business burglary, there's always that opportunity for someone to be hiding within that building and ambushing or attacking someone. We've had it at banks here in the city of Gainesville. We've had it at homes where people have left, come back, and were ambushed by people that were hiding in their homes. We are going to use the canine for residential and business burglaries. But for a conveyance burglary, we can pretty much look inside a car and identify the fact that there's nobody in there. And unless there is a firearm taken out of that car, stolen out of that car, and somebody's running with a firearm, we would curtail the use of the canine considerably. So what are the crimes that we would release a dog and have a dog do a capture? Those include ones that we've really never used here in Gainesville, like treason or aircraft piracy, but they are forcible felonies under Florida State Statute 77608. So of course, murder, manslaughter, sexual battery, carjacking, home invasion robbery, arson, burglary, kidnapping, robbery, aggravated assault, battery, aggravated assault and aggravated battery, aggravated stalking, and unlawful destructive devices or bombs. Now, for those of you that were around in 2021, at the beginning of the school year, when the bomb threats were off the charts, if somebody was to say that, I have a bomb in my vehicle, or they're running towards the school with a backpack and say they have a bomb, you bet it that chances are the canine would be released and make an apprehension, because we're not going to sacrifice the lives of hundreds and possibly thousands of children in a school for one person. Other qualifying events is any felony that involves the threat of physical force or violence against any individual, or any reasonable belief of violent misdemeanor or felony, which leads to circumstances for concern of additional violence. And a majority of these, as you can see, aggravated means with a firearm or a deadly weapon. And that entire list, except for the unlawful destructive device, is on its face is someone else's in peril. If you're in a plane for aircraft piracy, you're in peril because you have no idea what's going to happen to that plane. Robbery, that's one person versus another, taking something by force. Arson, I think that is the absolute worst way to die, is by flame. So all of these laws have someone that is in peril. Next. So just the benefits of the canine units in review include locating narcotics and guns. We have found guns that were discarded on a flight path that were literally within 100 feet of a school bus stop in the past. We found guns within apartment complexes. We found narcotics all over the place. As a matter of fact, I mentioned earlier the highway team from the drug task force. Last year, they seized over $1 million in narcotics and just under $40,000 in cash. It's been used to locate missing persons and, of course, used for officer safety. One of the things that I was remiss in saying yesterday, but I did hit in the MLK, was one dog going into a building like a Home Depot or a Lowe's or a Publix or something of that effect. Mr. Griner can probably chime in. Replaces a team of at least 4. And what I mean by that is that team that goes into a Publix or a Home Depot has a point person that does nothing but look down the aisles. They have entry team or side people that are responsible for maybe making an entry, and then they have a rear guard to make sure that nobody comes up behind them. So that one dog, when it comes to a building search, replaces 4 officers, and that's 4 officers that won't be victims of an ambush if there's somebody in there with a weapon trying to hurt them. Locating violent suspects who threaten public safety, that's pretty much a given, and assist in de-escalation. Like I said before, it's almost as if you have 7 officers come into this room at the same time versus 1 potential suspect. Next. So there are questions from the community, and this is from the MLK event on the 14th. We didn't really get all that much public comment yesterday. Had some issues there. But how many times were canines used to find missing persons? I gave the last one, which was December, before we kind of condensed the canine unit. Police departments deploy dogs on ordinary calls to artificially skew the bite ratio downward. So I will admit that during the V2 Global Review, they wanted to make sure that our bite ratio was indicative of people in handcuffs going to jail versus the number of bites. So our apprehension number includes someone went to jail on that scene, whether they got bitten or not. So you'll see that our bite ratio right now hovers around 10%. But going back in time, when we had 8 and 9 dog teams, that number was hovering between 3 and 5%, which any mathematician or any layperson can tell you, the more teams that we had, the higher the number of apprehensions, the 24-hour coverage that we had, and there was always the potential of a dog being on scene, so the chances of you being there during an apprehension were pretty high if you were a canine handler. Now, as we've condensed down, we don't have enough coverage for 24/7. In the past, we sometimes had 2 and 3 dogs working at a time. Not so much anymore, but Chief Scott has definitely attempted to get those numbers back up, and we have another upcoming canine process that just got advertised today. So one more thing on that. Essentially, our canine teams, as of October 22nd, 2022, had gone to over 30,000 calls for service in the previous 10 years. When you look at the bite ratios, which might come up in a little bit, we'll have 15 apprehensions by capture, meaning a bite, and 145 apprehensions. So that's how we get that 10%. If you were to extrapolate those 30,000 calls for service, you divide that by 10 for the 10 years that we asked the CCC to get these numbers, that's actually 2,000 calls that canines are on scene. That means that they were there, but the dog never got out. So they arrived on scene, they assisted with a handcuff, the dog never left the truck. We don't count that as an apprehension. The dog has to be out of the vehicle and be an active part of an apprehension. So that would include the dog gets released into this room, the bad guy decides that he's going to hightail it out a window, and once the guy gets outside, he's captured by another officer outside. That dog played an active part in that apprehension. So we don't skew our numbers, and that's why our numbers are so so low when it comes to the apprehensions right now, because we only have those 2 teams, and last year we only had 5 teams. But in the past, we've had up to, I think, 350 to 375 apprehensions with only a very limited number of dog bites, which made that number in the low 3 or 4%. Next one. Any more questions before we transition? Go ahead.
So, I mean, I was giving Claudette, and we can talk about it during the internal investigation stuff. I mean, it's the language that's used, for instance, in this, which was well-written. Because she heard that there could have been domestic violence or people fighting, then it gives her the ability to say, well, then I can release the dog. There's like this element of fear. And you did answer about, I'm glad y'all are going to have to call her, because it did seem like the officer herself was distressed. She wanted to get the dog off, but she didn't have enough. So I'm happy about that. I would like to, so at the MLK Center, we were told, don't look at 1963. That's in the past tense. You went all the way back to the Civil War. Kane, you said 18, well, the Civil War, the dogs were used. I feel like you're trying to, like you think that we're, and I'm not going to go through all this, that we're trying to, like hijack. You said this urban myth thing. Well, you're hijacking the history of how dogs have been used against African Americans, including.
I specifically said police dogs. So.
Well, they were considered,
a very,
right.
very distinct difference.
It is
between,
not distinct to
Okay.
people who are being chased
Okay.
with dogs. So I just want to say that I won't skew
Well, we
your
can go all the way
urban.
back to Neanderthal if you want to, I mean.
No, I
when
want
it
to
was
go
first.
back. My husband studies this
Okay.
stuff.
So
He
do
has a
I. I mean,
lot
I
of-
studied a lot as we approach this. So
Okay,
I mean, in
so
reality, we're going
it
back
is used-
tens of thousands of years.
Okay.
No, I don't want to do Neanderthal. I'm not making global statements, so I don't think that you should say, you know, MLK, the first thing I said, Chief Scott, we're not going to go back to 63 as if we're not allowed to look at how they have been used. And I'm saying there's other people in this room who have brought up that dogs were used. I mean,
I'm not
Colleen
dismissing
is an
that.
African-American
Yeah.
historian, that dogs were used, so I don't think you should start off with that.
I didn't start off with you.
All
Okay.
right, thank you. We'll make that note.
Okay, so I have a couple of other stuff. I also don't agree that the sheriff, that should be the training. I also have never gotten the answer if they are going to be used at community events. Is part of that going to be them seeing the canines grab the padded arm? I don't think kids should be seeing that. I have not gotten an answer on that.
We're taking all this information into consideration and make some determinations.
So you're trying to shut me down, or when will we get that information? Because I have brought this up before.
I'll just give you a simple answer to your question. We're in the phase of trying to make sure we have our policies in place, our training in place. We haven't entertained how we're going to run the road, the unit out as far as 6 months down the road, once we get to the point where we may do some demonstration. None of that's been looked at this point. What we're looking at is operations. How do we operate with the K-9? And that's what we're considering right now.
Okay, so the procedures and policies, I've heard 2 changes I think are super positive, but there is all these other questions. So, Kernick, are you keeping track of this, or are we going to get answers?
There's a second part of the presentation that when you finish, we'll let Chief Inspector Kernick come up and give you some stats and go on some other parts of the presentation. And if you have questions after that, we'll be more than happy to answer those.
Okay.
So I like to go back to the experience piece, as far as officers that are being allowed onto the K-9 unit. We've seen a number of IA cases where the justification was, oh, he's an inexperienced officer. Cases such as unauthorized chases, shouldn't that be taken into consideration as well in this? And I just looked up my former agency, U.S. Air Force. They require 2 years of experience. I always heard that it takes a good officer about 3 years to get settled in. That was always their philosophy. And I don't think it should necessarily be 2 years, but we should recommend at least 18 months on the force. Also, again, given that we've heard the justification of IA violations being, oh, he's an inexperienced officer.
We hear that, and we evaluate all of our specialties. Anytime we place an officer in a specialty, we have to look at the person, the whole person. You know, because you've been there for 6 years or been there for 8 years, doesn't necessarily mean that you have the aptitude or necessarily mean that you have the personality traits that we need or character traits that we're looking for. So that's a consideration, but it's not the determining factor. You know, some of us accelerated quickly. You know, for instance, I was 18 months and I was a corporal. You know, from the time I got in, and I was given a lot of latitude about the things I did. So it's based on the individual. And again, if we went strictly by how long a person's been in the job, if you look at your IA cases, you'll see some people that have been in the job for a while still make mistakes.
Yeah.
So we evaluate.
Chief, you're making my point.
We evaluate people based on all the factors, and their time and grade is one of them. Yes.
Could we continue with the presentation? Let's continue with the
Yes.
presentation.
Okay, I have
and
one
we'll ask more
question.
questions.
I think he mentioned officer rendering is going to be, is that true?
He mentioned that he tested.
He was one of the officers that tried out but did not complete the process.
Okay, because, yeah, he seems to not have a problem with workmanship and productivity.
Please go ahead.
Chair, thank you so much. Jamie Kernick, Chief Inspector at GPD. I'm going to transition to the next portion of this presentation, and my part of this is to introduce a testimonial from a K-9 sergeant. His name is Michael Pruitt. His dog saved his life. His dog lost his life in this call for service. I will let Sergeant Pruitt tell you the story about Euro, and we'll move to the next slide. And then I'll ask Ms. Holt to please start the video.
He reached in his pocket and pulled out another gun because the road had his gun hand in his mouth and shot him. When he shot him, I hollered no because he didn't want him to shoot my dog. And when I hollered no, Jerome released and came back to me and was shot again as he returned to me. Parker, Darrell Parker, I remember his name, Darrell Parker came down and looked right at me and grinned at me, pointed the gun at me and fired again. At that time he hit my dog again. I heard him holler. At that time I returned fire. They can scent probably 100 times better than us. They hear 4 times better than us. They can run 4 times faster than us. Police canines have a great discernment. They know the difference between a child that wants to pet them and somebody that wants to stab them. There's just so much stuff that dogs do that we couldn't do. Saving people, finding people. I mean, he found a 2-year-old that walked out of a daycare that had been missing about 2 hours, 15 minutes. He found it. You can't outsmell them. You can't outrun them. You can't outdo. The only thing that you have is a superior brain. So if you're smarter than your dog, you won't have a problem.
That's just a very quick video in the story about something that hits close to home for us. So the memorial to Euro is actually in our Hall of Heroes for all of our downed officers. He did sacrifice his life for Sergeant Pruitt. This next portion that I'm going to cover is about response to resistance statistics. It includes the dog bites that are in there also. But the reason that I am here explaining this portion of the statistics is because I'm the person who's responsible for internal affairs. And as I've presented in front of this committee several times, you guys know that very well. But I also go into explaining what is response to resistance, because we haven't had this opportunity to have this conversation with this group in quite some time. So we're going to go over a couple of those, and we'll go to the next slide. So the first thing that I want to say is all response to resistance techniques that we use at GPD are scrutinized by 3 levels of supervision. And what that means is if somebody employs a tactic to control someone that we are allowed to arrest or detain, basically it's scrutinized first by their line level sergeant, second by their supervisor who is considered their shift commander or their lieutenant, and then third by the captain in the bureau with which they work. And then it gets sent to internal affairs, which we also scrutinize those on a case-by-case basis. But what I will tell you is this. A response to resistance technique is any technique that we utilize that you have heard about before. It includes tasers. It includes takedowns. It includes a canine bite. It includes even dispelling our firearm if it does come to that. Any use of what we used to call use of force, any of those are scrutinized on a major level within our agency. We hold ourselves accountable for professionalism, openness, and transparency about these. And the reason that I say that is we come and present all of our closed internal affairs investigations if something rises to that level. This month, we do have an excessive use of force in those investigations. I'm sure through the pack of 10 that we will review this month, you guys will see one of those. But we scrutinize these to the highest level, and we're very open about them in terms of the results at the end of the year. We produce an annual report about all response to resistance techniques that we utilized during the past year, how they were utilized, when they were utilized, and we scrutinize them on a very high level. And we hold our officers to a very high standard. The other part I want to mention is our early warning system. If an officer utilizes force more than five times or more within a year, an early warning system is triggered in the internal affairs software. And it is sent to the internal affairs commander, which a subsequent review is done of all 5 of those incidents that have occurred by their supervisor, and a report is sent through the chain of command to make sure we're not seeing a pattern or a use of force technique, response to resistance technique, that is being overutilized, or an officer who may need additional training or understanding about why we use response to resistance techniques. So it's a way for us to keep track when things start to become repetitive or in a pattern, in a kind of a catch. So many agencies have early warning systems, and we are one of them, and we utilize it and make sure that we're following our policies and guidelines to the utmost. So it's not only on a singular version, but it happens when multiple cases do come up. The next slide talks about our response to resistance for the entire agency. And it talks about it from 2019 to 2022. So the first column that you see, of course, is the year. The second column is the number of calls for service that the Gainesville Police Department responds to every year. This is every time an officer has a conversation with a citizen or gets called. It could be anything that you could think of, even a traffic stop might be in there. But this is when we have interaction with the public. And our next column is the number of times that we had to utilize a response to resistance technique in order to control an individual or apprehend an individual who isn't complying with our commands. So think of response to resistance as a control technique we utilize in order to take someone into custody. And if you compare it to the number of calls for service, you look in the 4th column, and it's between 0.05% and 0.07% of the time that we had to use these techniques. So if you think about it, from 92,000 to 64 times, it's a very small amount of times that we ever have to use some type of technique in order to control someone. An example of that is someone fleeing from us, someone pushing or punching us, and we have to detain them, and we take them to the ground with what we call an armbar takedown. Or we have to deploy our taser because somebody's holding a knife to their neck and wants to take their own life. Anytime we use any type of response to resistance technique, this is categorized in each of these 4 years. So we want to give you that to start with. The second thing we want to do is let you look at how many over the past 4 years, that when we look at the statistics, what are the highest uses? And that, for our canine unit, it stays pretty consistent year after year. But really, our taser and our takedown, if you look over the few years, are the ones that actually have the highest spikes and are utilized the most. But it talks about our subject control spray, if we use any type of strike, kick, or punch. It goes into our improvised weapon, which would be maybe a flashlight if you had to deliver a strike to the common prony or to the leg. And you notice that very small amount, only in 1 year where we had 2 instances of our firearms use. But truly, this gives you an idea of all the techniques that we are trained to utilize and what we utilize the most. And you can see that through this. The next comparison that we wanted to throw up is our bite ratio comparison. Captain Ferrara went into what a bite ratio is. The most important thing to understand is that in Kerr versus West Palm Beach, when they looked at those statistics and they said agencies that you have to be concerned about their bite ratios are agencies that are above 20%. If you get above 30, you should really be scrutinizing agencies in terms of their bite ratio. This is us compared to ASO, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, and the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. And what you'll notice about all of our agencies is that our bite ratios stay about the same. We're right around 9.8 to 10%. Some of the others are pretty consistent. I think St. Johns County had a little bit spike there 1 year. But truly, the other 3 agencies all right now have more dogs in service than we do. We have 2 dogs, okay, versus some agencies have 6, some have more. But the number of dogs in that bite ratio, the most important part is that it stays consistent, it stays under 20%, and right now we're well within those ranges. The other part that we want to mention as you kind of look across the board, everybody's pretty consistent, right? So if you have a well-managed unit, and these are units that we've worked with before and we're able to get information from, they're pretty consistent. The next thing that we wanted to talk about is proactive versus reactive responses. So proactive is where the canine officer actually initiated the response. Reactive is when citizens called the police in order to get assistance. So if you look at these numbers, we have a very low percentage in terms of proactive. We had 96%. I apologize, I'm a little hoarse today. For the reactive in the external cases, you're looking at a 64% call ratio there. And for an internal request where a police officer needed assistance and requested the canine, you have it there as the next number. And I'm so sorry, it's a little far away and I didn't flip mine. 37%, I'm getting old. 37%. Yes, sir.
Old. Oh.
I apologize, colleague. Mr. Blunt, I apologize.
The total bites, is there available a breakdown of ethnicity of people who ever bitten?
Absolutely, and we can provide that information for you, no problem. Absolutely.
You have it in this presentation?
No, ma'am, I sure don't. We sure
So
don't.
we don't know the percentages of the ethnic?
We have them, I didn't bring them with me, so I can provide them for you as soon as we get finished with the meeting.
I think, in my opinion, that should always be included
Okay, yes,
in the
ma'am.
presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
If you could do that, that would be great.
Okay. Let me just
The
take a
reason
note.
I'm saying that, because according to statistics, 99% of people that get bitten by the canine are African American. So certainly I would like to know what it is in our area and Gainesville.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Is the rest of the presentation statistics?
No, I have one more slide and then I'm done.
Because I'm looking around, it's getting late, and we're gonna end up running out of time.
Sure.
I would like the motion that we refer to the presentation only as in regards to questions that we have
Sure.
at the council. If anybody wants to second that.
You have one more slide?
Just one slide after this one.
Let's listen to the last slide since you put it all together.
Thank you.
I mean, it looked like it was more than one slide, but. if you
Nope,
have-
it's just one. This is the last one here. So we wanted to list several of the types of criminal offenses between 2019 and 2022 that the dogs tracked for. They're listed here on the left of the slide. And on the right of the slide, one of the questions that the commission had asked us is, what would it be like without a canine unit and what were the possible implications? So we did add some of those on the right-hand side. One of the things that I do want to mention, and one last statistic, Mr. Johnson, if you'll bear with me, is from 2019 to 2022, our canines assisted in the apprehension of 598 individuals who were responsible for crimes. And that's a very large number. They help track, the deployments that Captain Ferrara mentioned when the dogs were actually on scene and participated in the apprehension of individuals. But that's a really key point for us. We talk about officer safety, we talk about the community safety, but we also talk about the implications of what it would be like for the dog not to be on the road. So in terms of time, I will end the presentation there to allow for any questions, and then whatever else, I don't want to belabor it any longer.
Other questions?
I have some concern, and I'm just going based on what I've read. There seems to be some differences between the city manager and the commissioners and our chief. And certainly we would like to have those differences worked out. You know, that's what my perception from reading and seeing things on the news and things of that nature. The other thing is the sheriff's ASO has offered us, GPD, to use their K-9 unit in the event it's needed. Is that a problem?
Okay, so let me bring some clarity to what and I gave this information last night. So we had a change in command. I made a change in the command for the K-9 unit. I placed the unit under Lieutenant West's command. I also had those canines assigned to the shifts. The supervisor at the time did not agree with those moves, and he opted to resign from the unit. He was our primary trainer, and he was our supervisor. Two other individuals also left the unit, and so that left us with 2 units. Neither one of them had the supervisory experience or the training. We thought we put a couple of things in place, and I made a decision to return them to duty, not thinking it, quite frankly, through with the litigation that was possible. So when I put them back in service, the city manager, and I put a news release out to that fact, and part of the reason I did that because there seemed to be confusion about who took the dogs out of service. And you read that it was the city commissioner, the city manager. It was me that took them out of service. I didn't ask for permission or anything. I took them out of service because I just didn't think it was a prudent thing for me to leave them out there. When I returned them to service, that was after talking with the new supervision, and we were lining up training. And I thought that training would be accomplished a lot sooner than it actually is. As a result of that, sitting down with the city manager, she goes, "Explain to me what you did and why." And then we talked about the possibility of litigation because these are brand new supervisors and we haven't done the training. So at that point, we agreed that we were going to take the dogs and put them in a limited deployment status. And that limited deployment status means they can only be deployed with my approval. So if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, something goes on, I have to approve their deployment. In addition, we put the restrictions in to forcible felonies and the violent misdemeanors, the domestic violence. Because I felt like if I have someone out there that's shooting at someone, and I have a person capable of taking a dog to track that person, I want them to be out there, but I want to be the person to make the approval. So the city manager agreed with that assessment. We have a plan, we put together, I guess, a tentative schedule, but we needed to work with the sheriff's office because the sheriff's office, we only have 2 dogs, and we have 24, 7 days a week coverage. Talked with the sheriff's office, the city manager and I met with him. He graciously agreed to supplement us, to help us out, that if we have, using the criteria I just explained to you, a need for a canine, that the ASO, if they have one available, would send that canine to assist. So we're working in partnership. That's what we do normally when we have our full complement of dogs and they have theirs. If they don't have a dog available and we do, we typically would send a dog to help them out in the county and vice versa. So that really is where all of this has come from, where we are. The city manager and I are on the same page. She fully supports the K-9 unit, 100% in fact, and she made that proclamation yesterday. She made that proclamation in the previous meeting we had. She made that proclamation to me when she and I met. And that's never been something that's been a consideration for us as support for the unit. So that is it. Okay.
So we are all on the same page. And so you, from this advisory board, we make recommendations.
Yes.
So what are you wanting us to do? What kind of recommendations based on what we've seen today, the presentation? What we need to decide as a board what our recommendation would be. Am I correct?
I think what we're seeking is, we showed you the adjustments that we made. You know, we showed you, some of the statistics. And so if there are questions that are out there that you think we might need to address, then we would like to get that information. You know, the information that we provided you, just really an analysis, an overview. This is how we operate. I think that's one of the biggest issues that we have. Sometimes we don't explain what we do and why we're doing it. And that's why we're doing it this way today and with other groups as well.
So what is the recommendation?
I have one recommendation. I'd like to recommend that the experience be moved from 1 year to 18 months. We've heard too many times that this is a new officer. And now in regards to the K-9 unit, it's okay to bring new officers on. I don't think that that's reasonable.
Now we have Captain West back there, and he's got
Lieutenant West.
how many years of experience?
Lieutenant West?
Lieutenant with K-9.
No, he's been the SWAT commander been on SWAT for how long?
15, 16.
And so, because this is a high liability area, I wanted someone that was used to dealing with high liability with SWAT, and because I wanted them to have that same type of principle and kind of guidance when dealing with the K-9. Ultimately, I'm responsible for the K-9s. I don't have any specialized training. I'm going to be making a decision right now to deploy them, but I'm going to be asking a whole lot of questions, and it's going to be based on what we lay
Is there
out.
a second to Breen's motion?
What,
Second.
what was
Well, I have some other questions.
let's
we're
see
trying
what he
to-
was saying.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
There's a motion to recommend that they move experience, the required experience from 1 year to the 18 months.
I'll second.
Second.
There's a second. Is there discussion on that?
Okay, so right now it's a year is what they recommended. Your motion
That's the
is-
requirement to get onto the K-9 unit.
So now you're saying,
Should be longer.
It should be at least 18 months.
do we have anyone that in your,
Well, and the lieutenant just brought up some points to me, and I think you want to phrase, the thing that also has to be considered is sometimes we have people from other agencies or people with prior experience, sometimes it's military experience, sometimes it's
That's
experience,
fine, that's fine.
but you can make your recommendation and send it forth, and then, we'll give it some consideration for
Can I
implementation.
ask a clarification
Go
though?
ahead,
I'm sorry, because when they talked about it, it was a year plus a year prior.
No.
So you're asking for
It's
18
1 year,
off.
but that 1 year can come from other agencies. That other
Can we
year,
clarify
that 1
that?
year
I don't
can
think
come
that's-
from military,
Can I respond to that?
What?
If I may?
Yes.
If I may. So, my experience with K-9, 15, 16 years of SWAT, but SWAT, we actually use K-9, so that's where my experience comes with that. So that's for that question, but I just wanted to, you were right, it's 2 years. If you don't have 2 years, we take prior experience, military corrections, and such, so it's
Chief Scott
actually,
said it was 1 year.
right, it's two. It's two. And
Is it 1 year or 2 years?
it's two.
The chief is saying 1 year.
Okay, just to clarify, and it's in our new policy, just to absolutely clarify. At the Gainesville Police Department, it's 1 year. At the Gainesville Police Department. But, okay, you need other time at another agency for an additional year. So at GPD, at minimum 1 year, okay, 1 year of experience at GPD, but another year somewhere else. Otherwise, our recommendation is going to be is 2 years. And that's-
So it's more than the 18 months.
Right, that's what I was
It's
trying to.
1 year with GPD and then one, what, 2 years of experience total.
So it's, okay, the 2 years, you never heard 2 years, so it's 2 years of experience.
Or
1 year at GPD and 1 year
somewhere
somewhere else, or 2 years at GPD.
yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
it wasn't explained like that.
Yeah, that's my
That
fault.
makes more sense now, than that, okay.
My-
You're gonna withdraw
my
your
fault.
Yeah, I
motion?
withdraw my motion.
Sheila, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So who is going to be doing the training? Like, I don't understand who trains, because you can be on the SWAT team, and I know he worked with dogs. To me, just looking at the internal affairs case, very specific commands, you know, or releasing the dog. So I know they said it was reciprocal, but who is doing the training, the evaluating? Also, I'm still concerned that that dog went for the neck instead of the arm or leg.
The training that, we went to an agreement with the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office is gonna assist us with our training. They have certified trainers. So the sheriff's office over the next few months, until we get everything up, until we get our folks trained as trainers and as supervisors, the sheriff's office is providing that assistance with us.
So who trained them? Like an outside agency? I mean, it could be like them asking me, can you train this kindergarten teacher?
That's,
since
the
you've been
certification
one?"
is handled by the state, so everybody has to be certified through the state.
To be a
And so-
trainer.
To be a trainer. So you can get the certification as a handler, and then there's a certification as a trainer. And so the sheriff's office has both of those. We had that. We are striving to get to that level again, and the sheriff's office is supplementing our training and providing, really kind of guiding our training right now, because we don't have the certified trainers on board. We're working under the sheriff's office.
Okay, and the last thing is about that case.
We're
The
gonna
dog
ask
got,
Sheila,
the
internal-
dog
This is
bit
this
on
is
the
the
neck.
language.
the internal affairs review is a little later. You're gonna ask about that case. We gotta ask that a little later.
Well, it's a general question, can they train that the dogs don't go for the neck or head? That other departments, it's arm or leg only, so it is specific. I just brought that up as an example. Can the training be the arm or leg, which is what I've seen other,
The training is typically that, I've sleeved dogs before, and I'm a big target. And I've put the sleeve on and sleeved them. The dog isn't trained to go for the neck. The dog is trained to bite and hold typically. And so the dog is trying to get that, when a person, in that instance that you saw, the person went down almost simultaneously with the dog getting on scene. If that had been a little different, the dog may not have bit that individual, but it was simultaneous. He went down and the dog was right there. The dog, again, I want to emphasize to you, almost 90% of our deployments, the people do not resist and they are not bitten. Over 90%. So that means 10% of the people resist in some form and are bitten. Now, we would like that to be zero, but reality is what it is. Everybody that we encounter does not want to come with us. And some of these folks, if we're down to 10% of those people resisting us violently, and we have to use a canine, I think that if you compare that with other agencies, and you saw some of the numbers, but look at the use of force, look at the response to resistance. Look at the number of folks, quite frankly, we have to use deadly force against. You don't see a lot of that here in Gainesville. You don't see a lot of, folks. We looked at the number of people that were hospitalized because we used a canine. The last 3 years, one. I think that says something. Now, we're not perfect. That's why we're here with you, to try to get recommendations of things that we can incorporate, and we appreciate your feedback.
Chief, thank you for the presentation.
You're
Greatly appreciate it. Okay. Colleague, go ahead, please.
I have some concern too about the work along with ASO, and it's really because it's a different command structure. The sheriff is a constitutional officer, so is not responsible to the county commission. Over here, it's a different structure where you're a civil service employee as well as a sworn officer and answer to the city commission. So it seems that we could run into some problems with that mixture in command structure. You know, it's two different jurisdictions and two very different command structures. So say a problem comes up with in an incident where the sheriff department and their handlers bring dogs, and a citizen comes to GPD with issues about it, and your IA people will be pretty much helpless if the sheriff says, tough, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But the standard that's established, one established by the sheriff, is established by the state. Additionally, if you recall that what I said is that the sheriff officer would be called and deploy their canines in accordance with the guidelines that we established for GPD. So they will only come out when I ask for them. Okay, and I think that's critical and important to know. So the sheriff office has standards just like we do. We both work in each other's areas. We're not exactly the same as far as our policies, but we're close enough, and we make sure we're here to the primary guidelines. Their bite ratio is comparable to ours. So, you know, to think that the sheriff's office canines operate at a poor level or not up to standard, I think is a disservice. They're just as capable, if not more capable, than the ones that we have.
Well, I wasn't saying that. I was just talking about how, you know, with these different structures,
Yes.
accountability
Yeah.
could be a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. You should have a copy of the 2022 annual report. At the last council meeting, you asked for 2 adjustments to that report. One was to reflect the meeting that was attended by over 50 citizens, and I included some wording in there with regard to that. The other was to reflect that we were not able to meet in the neighborhoods in 2022, and I made some wording to adjust to that as well. Is there a motion to approve the annual report of 21-22?
Make sure we, I just move, I'm happy to move approval of the presented, except I'd make a modification because we have to update the title to say 22-23.
To say, I'm sorry?
The title of it, it
Yep.
just had the wrong year in it.
To just say 22?
Yeah, 22 is
Yep.
fine.
Gotcha. Thank you. Can you move that?
Yep,
Is
I
there a
move that.
second to approve?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving the annual report from 2022, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And this has to be presented with some official.
Yeah, you'll turn in. Hopefully they'll invite you.
I think they're inviting Gina.
No, I think they're inviting you. No, I'll go. It will, yeah.
We'll
When you get invited, we'll figure out. We'll go. I don't mind going. I just
Good.
never got invited for last year, so that's why I'm like,
Okay, you should also have a copy of the quarterly report. It's the first quarter report of the fiscal year, October 22 to December 22. There was one meeting of PAC in October, and so I wrote this to reflect basically the conversation from the October meeting. Is there a motion to approve the quarterly report?
I'll move approval as presented.
Second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, quarterly report passes. You'd ask about the Public Safety Committee meetings and the council's interest in recommending that a member attend PAC meetings. And I put put that on the agenda for conversation. Is that the wish of the council, or?
I think you should extend a strong recommendation. I mean, through the bylaws and the bylaws, and what was the other thing we looked at?
The rules.
Rules. The wording was this assumption that there was a relationship between the city commissions and us. I don't see one.
Sure. Okay. Same feeling from everyone?
Yeah.
Is there a motion to make that recommendation?
I move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Okay, been moved and seconded to extend the recommendation for a Public Safety Committee member to attend PAC meetings. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes.
I'm glad they brought the Public Safety Committee back.
Yeah.
It's been missing for a few
Yeah.
years.
Yes, and I went to I came here to the most recent one because I speak for me personally as a member of the PAC. I find it beneficial for me to attend these meetings so that I will glean information that might be useful for the Police Advisory Council.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
We added sunshine law review as an agenda item, and I just put this on here because there were a couple of questions with regard to how we meet. You know, obviously this council meeting is publicly noticed. When Fareed and Sheila and I met, that meeting was publicly noticed, and we had a citizen attend. A little bit in confusion, but there was a citizen there, which was kind of nice. If Fareed and I can't meet on our own, obviously, and talk council business, we can't do that. Fareed and I could have lunch together and talk about family and work and friends and hobbies and all those kinds of things, but we couldn't talk about council business. But those of you that that have worked throughout your careers in the sunshine and understand the sunshine, are there other things that the council members should be aware of?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So when I send out a mass email, that's uncool because people in the community can't see it. I thought as long as, like, Cully and I are friends, we don't talk about this business.
You can do that.
Yep.
But I can send, but I can't send an email like with that list of 10 things that I think we should talk about to the whole, that's what you're saying. I was
Right.
told I can't do
Correct,
that.
Right.
correct. If you send it to Deborah, then she can send it out to us.
Yep.
Okay, well, in the past, it wasn't sent out. It was like something the chair got to decide if we were gonna take it up.
Yeah, well, Deborah and I have conversations, and so I obviously look at those things, and I felt the list that you sent was pertinent to the council business.
I
That's why I
appreciate that.
incorporated those things in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we should send those kinds of things to Deborah, and then she and I can have conversation.
But you can veto them, that's what I'm asking.
That's the chair's prerogative to certainly do that, and I would hope that any chair, myself included, would look at the values of what any member is saying.
So I'll just bring it up in conversation here,
You can,
if it's not,
certainly,
if it's ignored.
certainly.
Okay,
Yep.
I think it's because the email's not noticed.
I think there's some attention to this because of something that happened last week where I was calling some of city staff, and I actually think I kind of got handed around to the wrong people initially, so it ended up talking to a lot of people because of the community meetings that we've been having. Just had the second one at Lincoln, at Williams Elementary last night. Last night?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the issue was, well, I've been on lots of different boards and committees, and they always have somebody from city or county legal, whichever it is, to come tell us about sunshine law. And so we learned what you just said, that any two members of an elected or appointed body must not discuss issues that can come on to the agenda of the body without an opportunity for the public to witness that exchange. And I was concerned that more than one member of this body attending those community meetings and getting up to speak, even though we weren't talking directly to each other, that to anyone else looking, it could be construed as an exchange of ideas. And that, so those community meetings should be on the city's notice of meetings, and with the note that multiple members of PAC may be in attendance. And I thought that was an easy thing, but I ran into kind of a wall of, no, we don't do that. And it seemed like a good faith thing in terms of the city's commitment to doing outreach, to have it advertised in another spot. I mean, it's not like it's hard to do or that it breaks a rule to list it. But I was told, no, we're just not going to do that. And, but, you know, fortunately, I missed the meeting last week. I think you spoke at the meeting.
I was there, Reverend Reiner was there.
But you didn't speak in the meeting.
No.
Okay, so that didn't happen.
But we
Now,
both spoke at the City Commission Subcommittee meeting.
the public safety.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe the listings of that meeting should say that members of
I
PAC
didn't
may be
identify
present.
myself as a PAC.
Well,
board
what
member.
we're concerned is, what does the public see? If somebody goes there and sees that happening and they decide they want to call the state AG and complain that there was a conversation of PAC members that wasn't noticed as a meeting of PAC. They were in another public venue. So it seems so easy to just cover ourselves and have that listed. You might have to get into that complaint, that potential complaint.
And that was actually gonna be my example, is that's probably the case where either attending, where two different people from the same board attend a meeting that is not their meeting, so it's not public notice. That one is one scenario, and another one is by email. And, you know, that's probably just another way to do that. So, you know, I think basically if more than one of us attend any other event that where they might be talking, you might say, I believe X, and it would be something we would talk about in this board. Just, it's probably sensible to have only one person actually speak.
And I think the staff will keep us honest on the email thing. They'll
Yep,
send
they
us,
do.
send
Yep.
us stuff BCC, and we just don't have the option
Yep.
to go and
That's
send
fine.
all.
And if that's the preference, I have no issue. I knew about the public safety committee and so forth. I just came to listen and just say something, but I didn't see it at that time as being an issue, and we didn't have any discussion between us at that meeting, so I didn't see where it really was an issue, but certainly I'm agreeable to making aware it won't be an issue in the future.
Thank you. Some discussion. So we want to meet in the neighborhoods. And so we asked the city attorney, and the city attorney has said, there is no requirement that public meetings be live streamed on Facebook or any other medium. The issue that we have to be aware of is the location, and that we have to make sure that it's properly noticed. So if we're in a neighborhood community center, a gymnasium, a school, city hall, anywhere like that that's accessible to the public, that's perfectly fine. We can't meet during lunch and have a lunch because the public may not be able to afford lunch.
Okay.
So we just have to be careful not to do it around meals. So yes, we can meet in neighborhoods, okay? So that's a
Or
good
the
thing.
chair can pay for it.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
You won't like what I'm gonna pay for. Yes,
Mr. Chair, if I may, since you mentioned that at our last meeting, I volunteered to make some contacts about possible meeting sites, and I did that, and I had recent contact with Reverend Marie Herring. She's a pastor of Day Spring Baptist Church. She said, with enough, let's just let her know about our intent to do that, and she'll be more than happy to host one of our future meetings.
Thank you.
And Dayspring is a very pivotal, pivotal and good location in terms of getting, hopefully, community involvement in one of our meetings.
Thank you.
Can I also just add, also ADA compliant?
Yeah, that's
Yes,
another
yes,
good point.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
everything has to.
Wherever we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Dayspring is certainly a brand new facility, no problems with Dayspring, if it need be.
And you have TBD for October and December. Could one
So
of
Kelly,
those be the
if I
SWAT?
might, if I might, if everybody would turn to the sort of annual calendar. So given the.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
that's
what I'm looking
next.
at.
And I'll
Yeah.
get right to you in a second. Thank you. Given the city attorney's opinion, I sat down and went through all the training stuff that the council should go through, when quarterly reports should come to the council, when annual reports should come to the council. Instead of having monthly arrest reports presented here, change that to quarterly arrest reports, and then try to meet in the neighborhood every other month. And so when we meet in the neighborhood, not really have business there, but have a chance to listen to the neighborhood and respond to what they have to say.
I like that a lot.
And then when we meet here, we try to do the business, if you will.
What if no one shows up? What if there was very few people at
We're going to keep our fingers crossed and make sure we try to get some folks there. We're going to try hard. And we met in neighborhoods for years, and in some cases we had, I think the lowest was 2 or 3 that I recall, and we had 25 or 30 before. It just varied. But I think extending that opportunity into the neighborhoods is important for the council to do. And I remember vividly some of those meetings where people ask about bus stops, raised sidewalks, traffic signals. So it wasn't just Gainesville Police Department issues, it was other city-related issues, and we responded to those things and referred those accordingly, and by golly, they got fixed. And people saw that they got fixed pretty quick, and that was valuable. So I think we try and we put our best foot forward, and we publicize it as well as we can, and see what we can do. But this is sort of the schedule that I put together as a draft, and Holly, you had mentioned that there are some open dates for neighborhoods.
Yeah, the October and December, and perhaps one should be in the swag area. I don't know what the swag space, how it measures up as far as ADA accessibility.
Maybe not. I gotta believe they're ADA compliant.
County, that's the county.
That's a county.
Okay. Well, you want to get someplace southwest, I would think. These are all east, northeast, and southeast so far, aren't they?
Phoenix.
Can we, so Phoenix is a good one. Can we replace Borders with Phoenix?
Sure, we can do
Borders
whatever the
isn't-
council would like.
It's not the neighborhood that it used to be, and
Okay.
we were there in 2019, I believe, and we were in a small room and nobody from the community showed up.
So Phoenix,
Yeah, Phoenix would be a good one.
okay.
When we've had meetings in Pine Ridge, 50 families will show up.
Yep. Yep. Maybe add Pine Ridge?
Pine Ridge would be another one. Sure.
Okay. How do things look on the calendar? And I've got to add January, because again, the bylaws ask us to add the first meeting of the new calendar year. So I'll add January in there too. So we don't have to take action on this, but if folks are generally comfortable with this, we'll try to use this as a roadmap
I think it's
and
great.
adjust accordingly.
The post-COVID roadmap, I love it.
Post-COVID roadmap. Okay. Thank you. Fareed was able to get Sheila and myself together for a bylaws subcommittee meeting. You have an update?
We're still working on the bylaws. We are coming up with more ideas that need to be considered and possibly added to the bylaws. So once we finish that draft, we'll bring it back to the pack as a whole and present it, get the approval of the entire pack, and make sure there's any additional bylaws that need to be added. So until we have our next meeting, that's where we're standing.
Thank you for doing that.
Can that be sent out so everyone can read it beforehand? I know I can't read and think and listen.
The draft?
That-
You mean the subcommittee?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, when you get those questions answered that we talked about, could that be sent out so people can look at
We're
it?
gonna have one more subcommittee, and then we'll produce.
We are?
Yeah.
Do we set a date? We are?
Yeah, we're gonna have one more, and then we'll produce the draft for
Okay.
everyone to look at before it's finalized.
Okay,
We'll
okay.
vote on it, and then we'll finalize it.
Yeah, there was some opinion from the city attorney that the three of us have to take a look at, and so, yeah, we have to get together again.
Okay.
It didn't hurt that.
No, it was great. I'm gonna be your navigator in the truck though. The both of us can do Zoom
We'll be able to
in
Zoom
your
together.
truck.
Thank you for heading that up for us. Chief Scott, your update, could I ask if we could hold off on the org structure, and if you could speak to the meetings that you hold?
Bring up my mentor, my older mentor.
I think this week what he was referring to, been working very closely with the pastors, the local clergy here in Gainesville, and we spoke about a program called Focused Deterrence. And what that is we work with on the adult side, the Department of Probation. Chief Scott had his district commanders and lieutenants look at the area of Gainesville where individuals that they know are involved in violent activity, firearm violence. And some of those individuals were on probation. So we had a meeting this past Monday where we met with the local pastors, clergy. We met with resources, met with the BOLD program, but more than that, we met with the individuals. They showed up, and it was very interesting. I think out of 6 of them, only one had a high school diploma. They were talking about the need for employment, but they also referenced the need for more meetings such as this. What we did as a next step in the process is that they mentored with some of the clergy. Some of the clergy actually said, we're going to mentor with you. They're doing signing up for BOLD, so we can line them up with Santa Fe, as well as the employment inspectors, and we're going to meet again. It's something that we're going to continue to do. But we delivered a message, though. We're doing all this, but you got to cease. I think they call it ceasefire. You got to cease what you're doing, because if you don't, we had the state attorney there as well. We had Chief Scott there, and the message was that, you know, we're giving you an alternative, but we just can't continue to experience the violence within the community. So it was kind of our first time doing this, and I think we're going to do a separate one in the future with juveniles that are engaged in some of our violent activity in Gainesville, and we're trying to just do something different to see what the outcomes will be.
Sorry, can I ask?
Yeah.
You actually, these are individuals who were on probation for violent offenses?
Yes.
And we specifically
They've
asked
been
them?
convicted of, they've been convicted of violent offenses, yes.
Right, so I guess, was it just open to anyone who could show up, or was it
No,
specifically looked at them?
No,
that
no,
they-
specifically looked at them. His personnel identified that these individuals were still involved in some activities in the neighborhoods.
Okay.
And so what we're trying to do is, you know, you always just hear me say you can't rush your way out of it.
Sure.
Okay, so what we're trying to do is provide some positive alternatives for them, identifying what some of the needs are, working with them, but you got the faith-based community working with them. It's a community effort.
And was it just based on the information from what they were put on probation for, or is this new information about potential violations?
So what I did was ask the captains that have patrol and the investigations captain. I need you to identify 10 people in each district that are actively involved in gun violence and that they might become the perpetrator or the victim. And they gave me a list of 20-plus names. It's ironic that when we looked at the list, over half those people were on probation. And then further examination of the list, before we could get the meeting together, because we started this maybe a month or so ago, 3 or 4 of them have been incarcerated in that short time period. So what we did was to sit down with them, and we spoke with the probation folks. We've also spoke to juvenile justice. We told them that we want to get them together. We want to let them know that their names, that we're watching them. And we want to help them be successful and not be arrested. But if they don't take advantage of the situation, the services that are out there, and they continue the behavior of violence, our goal is to remove them from the community. But we put a lot of emphasis, and when you looked at the room, we're very proud of the fact that when you looked at the room, we had probably 25 folks in that room, and we had 6 of them, and we told them, all of us are here to help you. And there was people there from, we gave them mental health counseling. We had the health service from the GFR. We had all these services that are available, and what we're doing is pairing them with folks, and we're gonna, there's another mentoring program we're trying to incorporate that I think Mr. Johnson's working with us on, that we're trying to pair them with mentors who are going to work with them. This is not a one-time thing. Every month, we're going to be meeting with them and to see what their progress is and try to make sure that we're trying to save their lives, but we have to help them help themselves, but they have to be into it. And so we're going to do our best to make sure that happens. It's going to be interesting when we meet with the juveniles. That's going to be our next group, and we're waiting on them to give us a date, and we're going to do the same thing. We would like to have the parents there for the juveniles as well. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Greatly appreciate it. Okay, let's go to closed IA case review.
It's already almost 8.
We have 1 minute, 7. Thank you.
Well, but we haven't had public comment.
That comes right after closed IA case review.
I motion to extend for 15 minutes.
Motion to extend for 15 minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
I think
opposed?
we can do it on this 15.
Yep.
I'm in favor, but I have to leave shortly after 8 because I have another meeting.
Thanks, Bob. First case is 22-028. This is the case at the Social where a person was allegedly tossed downstairs by security. The case was a violation of work productivity or workmanship not up to standard or performance. That case was sustained, and the officer received a written employee notice. Are there any questions regarding that case? Okay. None?
Could I, sorry?
Please.
Was there, the sustained wasn't necessarily on looking at whether it was sexual orientation from Officer Alvin. Was there anything in that as part of the corrective action?
So the answer to that is during the investigation, those questions were asked, and we did not find any evidence of that being a reason for the officer not completing the report. He just didn't do a good job. So those questions were asked in the investigation, and we didn't find any, but the responsive in terms of the training would be that he would be retrained on making sure that when he responds to cases, and it doesn't matter who it is or where it is. But that wasn't, we navigated through all of that, sir, in the investigation.
Okay.
So the training wouldn't focus on that. If we found evidence of that, then that would be the case, but we didn't find evidence of that.
Yeah.
Case 22-042. This was an excessive force case. It was sustained. There was an employee notice that employee be dismissed from employment with Gainesville Police Department. That case was also forwarded to the State of Florida Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission for review to determine their state certificate for that police officer. The officer resigned under investigation. Are there questions related to that case? Okay, next case is 22-046. This was a harassment retaliation at the Gentlemen's Club, so we all enjoyed reading this one. So Officer Spalding, it was unfounded. Corporal Shutterly for invasive search, that was sustained, received a written warning. Sergeant Waggle, under command and control, that was sustained, he received a written warning. And Officer Alvin for unprofessional, making an unprofessional comment, that was sustained, that officer received a written warning. Questions regarding that case?
I had a lot of questions, I had a lot of notes, but I'm letting it go.
Okay. All right. Next case, 22-049. Get through this one.
This is the most sustained cases you've ever had.
You've ever
Yeah.
had, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So this particular case, officer, I might get some of these names mispronounced. Valsius was sustained, body-worn camera systems, received verbal counseling. In other words, he didn't have his body-worn camera active when he should have at that time. Officer Guyton was sustained. This was a productivity or workmanship. Received written instruction and cautioning. Received 5-day, 40-hour suspension without pay. Officer Guyton sustained for violating a safety rule and practice. Received written instruction and cautioning. Also received 5-day, 40-hour suspension without pay. Officer Guyton sustained improper conduct and indecency. Written instruction and cautioning, received a 10-day, 80-hour suspension without pay, forfeited fleet vehicle use, prohibited from overtime for 90 days, and required to attend remedial training. So those suspensions run concurrently at a maximum of 10 days, 80 hours without pay. And that's a standard practice of City of Gainesville employees, if I'm not mistaken. Questions regarding that case?
I want to ask generally about BWC policy. Are officers, are the cameras supposed to run 100% of the time, or the officers turn them on when they're approaching an encounter? And are there exceptions? And are there perhaps technical answers to make, like, can they, if somebody's camera turns off, they're automatically clocked out? Or, you know, is there some way to make sure that people keep their cameras running when they're supposed to?
So we have a body-worn camera policy that says when you go on a call for service and you are engaging in that call for service, that your body-worn camera will be activated and on for the entire duration of that call. If you end up standing with a tow truck and you're not engaged in any part of the investigation to tow a vehicle, officers are welcome to shut their cameras off during that time when they don't have interaction with the public and they're just doing a menial task on the side. But when you're interacting with the public, you must have it on. We have a policy that says that every supervisor must review 2 body-worn camera videos of their employees during the month and to make sure that they are on and they are following the policies and procedures, and that's agency-wide. We do end up coming across several officers who sometimes if they get in a skirmish, in terms of they're detaining someone and they end up going to the ground with a person, sometimes that camera, it has a big center button in it. If they hit that button, the camera will shut off. So sometimes there are exceptions. There's also exceptions in the hospital tally or in a medical, any kind of medical building that you're going into where people are receiving medical care. The cameras will not be on. We will not record statements of sexual battery victims. We don't do that anytime. So there are written exceptions. I can provide the policy. It is very lengthy, but there are times and exceptions, and that's more of a summary.
Are officers required to have their cameras on when doing inventory?
When they're doing
Inventory on like a vehicle or something? You mentioned.
that would be part of, yes, because I would assume if something came out of there that was evidence of a crime, you would want that on there. So yes, so if you remember from several cases that we've reviewed body-worn camera, their cameras should be on during that time. Because they're doing something evidentiary, you know, yes.
Is there an exception where an officer can turn off the camera if they claim they want to have a private conversation with another officer? They can They can
It's-
turn their camera off?
So it's supposed to be on during the duration of the call. So if it's a private conversation about what they're doing on the weekend or their family or something that's not related to the call, then of course we don't record those. And there is some buffering, so, and what buffering is when I turn my camera on, the camera actually will have a recording a minute prior to that moving forward. So that's just in case if in the heat of the moment you forgot to turn it on. It does record a minute before, but it doesn't have audio to it. And a lot of agencies utilize that feature with the body-worn camera system we have.
Sorry, I guess my question is like, if they want a private conversation about what charge, for example, to arrest for, is that an exception to the body camera?
No, sir.
Okay.
Not an exception. Yes.
Thank you. Case 22-053, this was a violation of an order of protection in a restaurant, and it was a productivity or workmanship not up to standard or performance, did not turn on the body-worn camera, and did not file a report. This case was sustained. Officer received a written instruction and cautioning. Questions on that case? Okay, case 22-054. This was an allegation of not turning over property properly, and it was unfounded. Questions on that case? Case 22-057, excessive force case, canine bite. This was unfounded, but there was a caution based on the use of profanity in this case. Questions on that case? Case 22-069, not placing a photograph into evidence. This was sustained. Officer received a written warning.
No, we already went over that. Why is this a different case number?
This is actually subsequent to that. A lieutenant had given them a direct order to do it and they did not. So this is just, it's all subsequent to it. It's not related to the photo itself being put in. That was handled in the other part. But this is actually in regards to the order that was not followed by the officer.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Case 22-084, improper contact. I thought the person fit a description of a shoplifter. Case was unfounded, but there was a conversation with the officer regarding de-escalation. Questions on that case? And case 22-090, this was failing to use due care in operating the vehicle. That was sustained. Officer was assessed 2 points. An employee notice was issued, loss of take-home vehicle for 1 week, and required remedial driving training. Questions on that case? Okay, thank you. We're going to move to public comment for any agenda items. Is there anyone that would like to provide comment? Okay, thank you. You have 3 minutes. Please, if you would introduce yourself.
My name is Danielle, I'm a community organizer. I'm going to speak very fast because GPD gave a presentation that was over an hour long, but I get 20 minutes to speak. So my first suggestion would be that you guys should limit special presentations to like 20 minutes. I mean, that was just like really long and I'm tired. I'm trying to go through this as quickly as I can. So one thing is I think it's like really hypocritical of GPD to come into meetings here when they've been doing meetings for the past 2 weeks, and Chief Tony Jones actually went into a meeting and talked about how we don't talk about things that happened in 1963 but 2023, but then come into a meeting like this one and talk about things that happened in 1977, 1972, 1986 with other dogs. If we're gonna say we're not gonna talk about the past, let's not talk about the past, let's talk about what's happening right now. Also, I thought it was weird that in their presentation, on the slide that it said canine units save lives, they talked about how a canine officer saved a choking baby. I don't understand how like that is specific to the dog. Did the dog save the baby? Like that was just I don't really get the relevance of that. Also, when the question was asked by the public, I believe that Officer Farrar was referring to a question I asked about how many times have canines been used to search for missing persons. For clarity, I want to know how often have canines found missing persons, because he said the last time they were used was in December of 2022 when they searched for a person and it it didn't do anything because the person was found in Clay County. So again, I don't really feel like that was a great answer to that question. It's not really relevant. It's not showing me how the canines are useful in finding missing persons. They look for somebody they didn't find. Honestly, it's hard for me to follow my notes because I think public should be able to give comments as soon as the agenda item comes up rather than like 35 minutes later. Also, in the policy updates about crime types, they're really specific that they list aggravated assault, aggravated battery, aggravated stalking. So I just want the clarification from GPD that simple assault, simple battery, simple stalk, like all these simple charges where there's not a weapon involved are not part of their definition of forcible felonies. And also, I don't see anything here, again, specifically about firearms possession. So I'm just really curious about how the presence of firearms plays into these policies, because I just don't think that that was quite clarified. In the benefits, they talked about locating violent suspects, and I'm really curious, does that mean people who have a history of violence versus somebody who's accused of committing actual violent crime? This sucks, I only have 10 seconds left. I don't know, y'all. My brain's not working at this point. I've had a long day. Also, when it comes to noticing public meetings, you shouldn't just keep your fingers crossed, but actually do community outreach, and that's how you get people to show up.
Appreciate your comments. I would ask if you have a couple of minutes, if you wouldn't mind meeting with Captain Ferreira. He would provide a little clarification on the aggravated battery, the simple battery, that comment that you made. I think he has some clarification on that for you. Okay, thank you.
Actually, could you spare me just 20 more seconds to make one more comment?
You have 20
please?
seconds.
Thank you. So one other question I asked at a community meeting last week is that the Alachua Chronicle alleged that Officer Walsh was in pursuit of a robbery suspect in February 20th of 2022, and that suspect was not apprehended because K-9 Stern actually bit Officer Henderson, who was in foot pursuit of that suspect. Officer Walsh's dog is also the dog in the IA report that bit somebody in the neck. I've heard she's a great officer, so this is not personal, but the conversation around the canines has revolved a lot about whether or not people have control over their dogs, and I think those two very recent incidences would indicate that, again, you can't control what happens out in the field. So I just am really curious about that incident.
Other public comment? Okay. Council member comments.
Danielle brings up a point I wanted to touch on before and never remembered to do it. I know in the city and county commission meetings, they have general public comment for items not on the agenda. They even have early public comment for people who won't be able to stay for agenda items, that they can comment on things on the agenda. But then they also have public comment per motion. That is, when a motion is made and seconded and the chair asks if there's other discussion, also asks if there's any public comment. And I don't think that's specifically required in the Sunshine Law, but it's something that the city and county commissions have made a habit of, and I think that's a good thing. And as Ms. Chanza said, it's the public is getting a tiny, tiny window, and there may be, there were multiple things in the agenda they wanted to speak on, and so we waited a long time after the item is closed and gone, and getting a tiny window to speak. So
I appreciate that. I tried a little bit in doing public comment early for non-agenda items, if there were people that couldn't stay, that wanted to make some comments, and then, another public comment for agenda items. I like the idea of providing public comment for items that are motion. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable.
Yep.
Yeah, great suggestion. Thank you. Other members? I'd just like to say, we went through the IA reports pretty quick. There were a handful of questions, but I think it also speaks to the fact how well investigated and how well written those reports are. So thank you to those who investigated those reports and wrote those reports. It was just very, very well written. I've been reading them for 13 years.
Yeah, there was a lot of
These are good, these are really good, so greatly appreciated, thank you. And
I
as Bob
actually-
had mentioned, you know, I've never seen so many cases that were sustained
That's true,
as
too.
well.
Yeah, I like that, because to me, it's showing that the chief's garden department is going to hold those officers responsible who are using poor judgment and so forth and so on, and that's a good thing.
Sheila?
I had comments, but I knew I'd give y'all a break. This took about 4 hours to read them all.
There were a lot.
There was a lot in here.
So our next meeting, we're scheduled to meet at Lincoln Middle School. So, more information on the way. If there's no objection, we stand adjourned. Adjourned.
That we can waive them if we want to.
I'm okay with whichever staff thinks is appropriate, or you think is appropriate, so.
Do you need a motion to amend our rules?
Yeah, well, we don't normally take motions at this meeting. If you want me to bring back the rules, I'm happy to. And I think what we'll do if we open up the rules is if you see anything else in there that you want in there, including, you know, like the vote, no voting at this meeting, if you want that, those kind of things, just let me know and we'll bring back
Okay.
Seems like a good idea.
I think
Okay.
this is where I'm confused too, is are we voting at these meetings or not? Because we've had major votes come up at this meeting.
Madam Chair, there is nothing in your policies, it's just something that you all have said. There's nothing, even if you put it in your policy, you can decide to waive that by a vote of 3.